Hello, and welcome to the Physical Therapy Owners Club podcast. I'm Nathan Shields, your host. And today I've got a coaching client and good friend, Trace Kennemore, owner and founder of Southern Rehab PT just outside of Chattanooga, Tennessee, who's coming to share his experience on dropping a low insurance payer. And first of all, Trace, thanks for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Hey, I appreciate the opportunity to come on and speak about this topic that is, it's a big topic and, something that's very viable to the everyone's ability to continue in outpatient physical therapy, I think.
Yeah, it's one thing that is, if you look at any of the surveys, right, and WebPT does their surveys, and I'm sure there's other surveys that are out there on an annual basis, but one of the general concerns, of course, is declining reimbursements. And it's not getting worse, and especially with the current issue regarding inflation in the country. Here we are, early 2023. It's getting into the eights, nines, and even double digits in inflation. The added expense really puts pressure on the PT owner to squeeze out a smaller and smaller profit margin when we continue on with these contracted rates that are so low. So I'm really excited to bring you on because you've gone through this before. And if there was one thing that I would love to share with the PT owner world out there is like how to get rid of these low payer contracts, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. And
Yeah.
it has been a journey. I hope that's what we will bring out to some others and it'll resonate with some people. Quite frankly, I think it may resonate most with the small mom and pop shops such as mine. A lot of times when you have one foot in patient care and one foot in the administrative side, that's just the reality that a lot of us are dealing with that are in the private practice world.
Yeah. Before we get into it, we're going to share your experience in dropping a low payer here in a second, but just share with everybody a little bit about you, where you're coming from.
Sure, absolutely. Well, this is a second career for me. I was originally a high school teacher and coach. Then I had a short stint in the military, and I couldn't decide what I wanted to do when I grew up, and so started investigating other avenues. And fortunately, in the military, I was exposed to the medical side of things, and so landed in PT, and it's been a blessing. I started my company. I started out working for someone else, and I did that for 6 years to learn the ropes, so to speak. I really dove into the business side, the administrative side, because as everyone knows that's a PT, we learn absolutely zero about being a business person in PT school. And most of us striving to do own a business. So,
Mm-hmm.
it's doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But so
Mm-hmm.
after working for someone for a while, I was encouraged by a local orthopedic physician to open my own practice. And my practice is in a small rural community, as you mentioned, outside of Chattanooga, Tennessee. And it just happens to be the place where I grew up. And so it's been really good because the community gave me an opportunity. Um, and like I say, I've been blessed beyond measure to serve my community. And as we'll talk about in a moment, that's one of the things that makes it so difficult to drop an insurance.
Yeah, especially this being your hometown, especially in small towns, you want to serve the community. You want to be all things to all people, right? I think as an industry, we as physical therapists are people pleasers and we want to serve. We have this altruistic nature about ourselves. We're compassionate. We're willing to sacrifice ourselves in the name of doing the greater good. But how far do we go? How far
Yes.
are we willing to take it in order to serve that greater purpose, right? And at what point are we being a detriment to maybe our community, maybe our employees, and to ourselves, where the sacrifice isn't necessarily appropriate? As we're talking about that, let me start from this point. So we've been doing some one-on-one coaching for some time. And do you recall a time when I brought up the idea of dropping a low payer and your initial emotions regarding that?
I do. Yes. I had contemplated that as I, become more and more business minded. I've had this business 17 years, so it's about time I learned how to run the darn thing efficiently and effectively, I think. But actually, I've always made excuses not to drop the lowest payer. For example, every time I would contemplate dropping one of my lowest payers, then I would get one of my local high school athletes that I take care of that would have an ACL surgery. And he would have that particular insurance. And then, that was just something that really hit home
Yeah,
of
just a pull on the heartstrings there,
absolutely. Yeah.
right?
And quite frankly, in a rural community, healthcare is not easily accessible. And, sometimes we can, as PTs, can serve a pretty valid role in, taking care of members of our community, regardless of their insurance. And that was my thought process of I need to help anyone and everyone. Um, but to directly answer your question, as we went through some analytics and looking at the future of my practice, along with, physical therapy in general, um, I started to realize that yes, maybe I'm taking good care of the community by taking care of everyone, but am I taking good care of my coworkers that I love and care about so much? Um, we went through the pandemic together, and I told them initially that was a litmus test to see how much the company cared about them as well as how much they cared about the company. And they demonstrated to me that they really care about the company that they work for. And so I got to thinking that one of the things that's prohibited to me from taking better care of them financially, benefits, compensation package, etc., is that I'm not being a good steward of the business.
Mm.
And so, I had to weigh the options of, yes, I want to serve my community and I want to serve everyone in the community, but not at the sacrifice of my coworkers. And I think the final straw was when I saw that a particular um, insurance company posted a $24 billion profit that I am subsidizing by seeing their clients for substantially less than it cost me. So
Well, we can say that's United Healthcare,
there you go.
right? Let's let the cat out of the bag. When we're
Yes,
talking a
sir.
lowest payer, I think nationally everyone understands when you say United Healthcare, everyone's gonna be like, "Oh yeah, I know what you're talking
Absolutely.
about."
So, but that was it. It was just that realization of, looking at the big picture. Was it fair for me to make the decision for my coworkers that I'm going to basically not be able to progress them
Mm.
in terms of financial compensation, et cetera.
And
And
if I'm
so,
not mistaken, you probably for well over a year, you guys have been running red hot. And when I say that, you guys are full. Your utilization numbers are great. You're looking for adding team members. The schedule is full. You guys are packed, and they're running around fully scheduled. Did it come to mind that maybe maintaining this lowest payer was a detriment to the care that they were providing as well as losing money?
yes, sir. It was a combination of two factors. Was it potentially a detriment because I was asking them to, um, you know, basically, good Southern term, push the wagon uphill every day? Um, and, I mean, it was because also, like so many small rural areas, I have staffing issues,
Mm-hmm.
to compete with the hospitals, et cetera, in today's reimbursement climate is difficult to do. And so I found myself putting more and more on my staff. And so not only was I concerned about the quality of care, then also I was concerned about the burnout of my staff because, we pride ourselves in our culture that um, I've established what I call a system of reciprocity from a business perspective between myself and my coworkers. And it's, give and take on both parts, not just take on the business side. And I felt like that's what I was getting to, just, you know, being unfair to them.
Yeah, asking them to see so many patients because you took all comers, right? We're going to take them all and you're going to see them all. And we're going to.
Absolutely.
And was there ever any kickback from the team in any regard, verbal, nonverbal, that maybe you're pushing us too hard or, hey, I'm not providing the quality care that I want to provide?
Yes, initially nonverbal, but I still have a small caseload. And so, I'm out in the gym with boots on the ground, and that's my way of, gauging the climate, so to speak,
Sure.
gauging the culture.
Right.
Um, and so I could tell that, there were some frustrations from time to time. And so I started having some direct one-on-one conversations. And, I have almost zero turnover from a staff perspective on the treatment side. And so I've got staff that's been with me since 2008, 2010, 2012. And so, we've established a mutual respect with an open relationship. And, I was just asking them their very thoughts on this. And, there was some definite, I don't want to say undertones of resentment, but frustration would be the appropriate word.
Sure.
But yet they didn't want to let the company down or the clients were serving. So they were just digging deeper and working harder. And how
Mhm.
long can I ask them to do that? And so, that was a huge factor. And I guess that was the tipping point.
That was going to be my next question. What was when I talk to owners about dropping an insurance, there's a few concerns that come through their mind, right? And I want to ask you what your tipping point was, but what are some of the other concerns that you had? You wanted to be a servant to the community, right? And you have these patients that you want to serve. You want to be all things to all people. Were there any other concerns that you had going through your mind?
Those are the primary ones of,
Okay.
you have to weigh the business side that we alluded to of, making sure that you can post a reasonable profit so that you can give to
Mm-hmm.
your coworkers, et cetera. And, you also have to balance that with a PT's natural altruistic nature of wanting to be everything to everyone.
Yeah. Because financially, dropping the lowest payer and maybe filling those spots with a higher payer and
Mm-hmm.
actually having people come in 2 and 3 times a week instead of maybe 1 or 2 times a week,
Yeah.
financially, it's a no brainer. It's obvious that if you have the open spots and people aren't able to reschedule and get in, you should be doing this all day long. The other concern that comes up as I'm talking to owners, and I think you went through this as well because you have an orthopedic group nearby you, is how is that going to affect your reputation? How are you going to be seen
Mm-hmm.
by your referral sources? Did you have some of that concern as well?
I did a little bit, but I'll be honest with you in that since I'm in my community and I've established a really, really good work family around me that's just super skilled. They make me look darn good. And so we have a really good reputation in the community.
All
And
right.
so I was less concerned about that
Mhm.
because most of our clients come to us not through the physician. But now I will say this, and this is a point I'd like to make, is if you're earlier in your career or you're not fortunate enough to be serving the community, where you grew up, that's a real, issue.
Those
Um,
relationships got to be strong.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
And so, that's a huge factor in that, do I do this or do I not do this? Because early on, I had the same sense of number one, when I started the business, when you start out, you take a loan that's much more than you ever thought you would borrow. And then you contemplate whether or not you're going to have to give up at least one kidney to make
Mhm.
things work in those early days. But, you have that realization of you have to take everyone, keep all doctors happy of, oh Lord, my business is going to collapse if this one particular doc, uh, you know,
Right.
decides that it's too much trouble to figure out which insurances do they take at Southern Rehab versus,
Yeah.
you know, the other ones in the zone.
That's a concern that just from my experience talking to other owners is a pretty common one. And you've been around long enough in your community that you could have those conversations with the doctors and they'd understand, I'm sure. And you're going to make, I don't want to speak for you, but you're going to provide opportunities for those people who come in who are out of network to still potentially see you. So you're not going
Yes.
cold turkey. And you also have a relationship with the referral sources to work that out. But I would say overall, I think most in this climate, most doctors out there in the nation, they understand when you're dropping in insurance because many of their groups they're not necessarily all things to all comers either. They're not taking all the payers, so they can understand when there are financial things in play. You had this idea that financially, yes, this would be better for me. And also you've discussed it with your teams and what was the eventual tipping point? What psychologically turned you and made you committed? I'm going to do this.
It goes back again to some conversations that we had, and it's advantageous just to talk through these things, with a coach, et cetera. Peer-to-peer group. That was my other conversations after you and I would discuss these things, just to go through and work through that psychological because it's not just objective.
Mm.
That's the point that I think some people miss when they think, oh, why doesn't everyone just drop this? Um, because there is a business objective side to it, but there's a psychological component. It's similar to retiring. You may have a number and you will be financially set, but you better be emotionally set. This is akin to that. I mean,
Yeah.
you have to be willing to turn that young kid away that's just had an ACL surgery, that's a high school kid on the football team that you stand on the sidelines with on Friday
Mhm.
nights.
Right.
That's tough.
Yeah.
I think the other side of it is that to give up this insurance, I'm not giving up my altruistic nature and taking care of my community. It's like you mentioned a moment ago. I'm going to take better care of the patient population that I'll have, um, because we were in that cycle you mentioned of, if someone cancels, there was not a chance of getting them back in on the schedule, in
Right.
a timely manner.
Right.
And just also, I'm still going to do some pro bono stuff.
Sure.
You know, I'll still be on the football field on Friday nights and doing
Mhm.
courtesy assessments of the injured athletes.
Mhm.
Community members, we offer free courtesy visits that I'm taking up on quite frequently.
Yeah.
And so, you do not have to give up your altruistic nature and your
Mhm.
compassion.
Yes. Yeah. I'm
So,
glad you pointed that out. So,
yeah.
so you said, okay, I'm going to drop United Healthcare. Here I go. And then you just sent in the letter, and 90 days later, it was all done, right?
Absolutely. Oh, it was so easy. So, man,
Wrong.
my gosh. I mean, this process, I increased the stock of bourbon uh, initially and decreased it quite substantially over this process.
Yeah.
This is one of those processes that would make a preacher curse. Um, but so what happened was, first of all, since I started my practice back in 2005, I couldn't even find a copy of my original contract.
Sure.
And so I thought, well, hey, I'm wanting to drop United Healthcare. So how do I go about this? I thought the
Mhm.
smart thing to do was to go on the UHC provider portal, get
Sure.
the appropriate contact. Maybe there's fax it to this number or email it to this
Mhm.
address, etc.
Right.
I'll receive a confirmation, and then they've received my notice. I've got 90 days. I'll script my plan for what I'm going to tell patients and doctors, and
Yeah.
smooth sailing.
Right.
That could not be further from the truth. I'll shorten this and I'll keep the foul language out of it.
Thank you.
But so when I was contacting UHC directly online, I actually had to make two phone calls to people. I found some numbers, just trying to get some, through an investigative approach. Where do I start? And so I was given two different email addresses of like, oh yeah, no problem. Just email it to this address and this address. This will take care of UHC. This will take care of Optum. And so, I crafted what I thought was a professional letter to let them know of my change of network status in 90 days with the appropriate effective date and things like that. And so I sent those, and I received almost immediate auto responses, basically saying this is not the right place to send these, etc. And so my next step was, I'm a member of PTPN. It's Physical
Okay.
Therapy Providers Network, national organization. So I reached out to PTPN, someone in the leadership role, and said, hey, please help me. How do I get out of UHC? And it was, oh, no problem. Just send your resignation to this email. So this is email number 3, email address. Well, not long after that, I was excited because I thought this is it. And so I think I even sent you an email saying, hey, I finally bit the bullet.
Mhm.
I'm on my way. I'm starting to script my what I'm going to tell everyone. But a week later, I received this email, and I'm going to read this just for a second. The email's from, it says, thank you for contacting the United Healthcare Network Management Resource Team. We are not the correct contact to answer your questions. And so
I
here we
didn't have
go
any
again.
questions, by the way.
No, exactly.
It was a statement.
And absolutely. And so, to make a long story short, there was at least three other email addresses given to me,
Wow.
and none were correct. And these are, either emails or verbal conversations, or, me responding and saying, you giving me the wrong one. Where do I go next? Well, I started this process in August. So in October, I
Wow.
finally spoke to a human. I spoke to the vice president of um, provider relations.
Hmm.
And I thought, man, I have hit the jackpot. What I asked her is, do I at least have a provider rep, someone that I can speak to help me through this process, or can you tell me where to send it? And she basically was not sure. She would investigate it. And so I sent her all my information of whom I'd contacted so far, and we got absolutely nowhere. So she finally had someone contact me from Optum, and this is the contract manager network development, Optum.
Mm. So
And
the
again,
contract manager.
we're over 6 weeks into this thing.
Yeah.
And so I'm just now getting to the person that I thought was the one. And so she investigated it for me and said, I can't find anything in our systems that indicates that you have turned in a letter of resignation of going to out of network status.
Right. Right.
Where do I go from here? What's next? And
Yeah.
she said, well, do you want to renegotiate?
Hmm.
And I thought, well, I'm 6 weeks into it. I'm still taking some UHC patients because I had post-op patients reach out to me.
Right.
And so I have not clearly delineated my exit strategy with my patients.
Hmm.
And so what the heck? So she sent me original copies of all my contracts,
Oh.
and
Mhm.
then I reviewed them and told them which ones I was interested in attempting to get increased reimbursement for.
Gotcha.
And so she submitted that. And so here I am
Okay.
on pause again, with about
Well,
6 weeks to go.
don't skip a step, because I know it's at this point that you finally recognized after you, and this is something that for people who are listening, maybe that's the verbiage you need to use as you're communicating with opt-in/UHC is find the contract manager. Maybe if
Yes,
you use that, if you knew that vocabulary to begin with, maybe you would have gotten there faster. So for others who
absolutely.
could learn from this, look for the contract manager over provider relations. But you said you found contracts. So there wasn't just one, right? And this might be particular to your region, but it might be nationwide also. Tell the listeners why there are multiple contracts with United Healthcare.
Sure. Yeah. To speak to your point about the contract manager, first of all, it is by state. For instance, the one that
Okay.
I spoke to covers 9 states in the Southeast.
Okay.
And so it is, you will have to find your region
Right.
contract manager through
Right. Right.
Optum, by the way.
By Optum. Uh-huh.
Um, yeah, not United Healthcare.
Right.
Um, so I guess the different contracts I received, because I was thinking, okay, I want to drop United Healthcare. But it turns out that United Healthcare has a couple of buckets of insurance. And so one would be United Healthcare Medicaid, and then you would have Healthcare Commercial, and then you would have United Healthcare Medicare.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but here's the caveat: with my conversations with the contract manager, uh, if I drop the United Healthcare Commercial and Medicare, I may have to also drop the Optum VA um, contract as well.
Mm-hmm.
And that really threw up a red flag to me, because, that was another intrinsic struggle, is that through the umbrella. So United Health Group is the owner. The subsidiaries under that are Optum and United Healthcare, is my understanding.
Okay.
But Optum handles all the contract negotiations for Optum and United Healthcare.
Okay.
And so there's where they get intertwined. If I drop certain United Healthcare contracts, it was going to kick me out of certain Optum contracts
Mm-hmm.
that I did not want to get out of. And the primary one, again, as I indicated, was the VA, because that was kind of near and dear to my heart, to make
Sure.
sure that if reasonably financially responsible, um, and had the ability to do so, then I wanted to stay in the VA contracts.
Right.
But it turned out that um, it's a bit of a pick and choose, and you
Hmm.
have to be careful.
Right.
Um, so to make a long story short, I could drop Medicaid
Hmm.
and still stay in the commercial
Commercial,
and the Medicare, as
Medicare,
well as the Optum contracts of United of
VA,
VA and the Workman's Comp.
workers' comp. Okay.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
but if I dropped United Healthcare commercial and Medicare, it was going to kick me out of the
The
Optum
Optum
contracts.
contracts. Gotcha. So
Yeah,
you ultimately just dropped the Medicaid contract. Is that what I'm
I did,
remembering?
because they renegotiated on the commercial and Medicare contract. By the way, those are lumped together. You
Oh, okay.
cannot separate those.
You can't drop one and not the other. You're going to have to
Correct.
stick with Medicare and the commercial. So you
You
dropped
got it.
Medicaid because they weren't willing to negotiate on the reimbursement for Medicaid. You dropped that, and that was a very low percentage of your clientele, anyways, from what I remember.
Correct. You are
And
correct.
and so you negotiated the other. Can I ask you the numbers? Is that okay?
Sure, I don't mind. No,
What were you able to negotiate from them?
they increased $15, yeah, per visit for both of
Nice.
those. And so,
Win.
yeah, I mean, and it allowed me to, you know, stay in it a little while longer while I construct a better plan, because, mind you, this is taking place on the 89th day of my 90-day notice.
Right.
Literally, I got the new rates on the 89th day,
Oh my gosh.
and it was from a phone call from the contract manager, because I had reached out to her, multiple times, email, phone calls, etc. Hey, what's going on? And so she finally reached out and said, I finally got the new rates. Here they are. And it was kind of one of those things of, I either had to say no, because they still had not received my official notification, by the way.
Oh, really?
And so I didn't want to start the whole process over. And it was a
Right.
win that, temporarily I could live with the rate temporarily. So if you're from United Healthcare and you're hearing this, that don't mean I'm going to take this forever.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, congratulations on, because I think, how long have you been dealing with this flat rate payment with United Healthcare? How long had it been going on?
2005.
Right? I mean, we're talking
Yeah.
like 17,
Yeah.
18 years. You're getting the same payment, not adjusted for inflation, by the way.
Exactly.
Right. And so, yeah, I think a lot of people just assume that that rate is that rate and it's non-negotiable. And when they hear stories like yours, and I've heard others as well, where they actually bumped it up, and people say, "Oh, you can do that." I'm just
Yeah.
assuming the fact that no one knew where to guide you tells me that not enough physical therapists are pushing this avenue, or they're not asking enough questions and pushing it to the right people. If more therapy owners were out there actually pushing for negotiated rates, there'd be a quick and easy, oh yeah, we get these calls all the time. You go talk to so-and-so, the contract manager. I'm assuming that contract manager is kind of twiddling her thumbs because the PT owners aren't actually reaching out.
You're probably right. You are probably right.
Yeah.
So quite the confusing process, and I think a takeaway on this whole thing is, start with the contract manager, like you indicated earlier, for your particular region, and just dive in and ask those specific questions of, if I drop one, how does it affect the others? And first of all, request your contracts, because she's the
Right.
one that sent me. And, I was surprised. She sent me like 15 contracts, and probably 5 of them I didn't even know I was a participating provider.
Really?
But they were managing them.
Mhm.
There were some workman's comp contracts in there that I was familiar with. But, just finding out the game of, it's not as simple as saying, I'm going to drop the commercial UHC.
Mhm.
You need to know the effects of that and make that decision,
Mhm.
if you do so.
Yeah, one thing that I've seen owners have a hard time with is requesting contracts, really drag their feet on that. And they'll slow walk those contracts back to you, even if they were able to find, because that's labor on their end to go find a contract and get
Yeah.
it to you. But if we're being responsible business owners, we should have those contracts on file. And that doesn't necessarily need to be the owner's responsibility. If they have some kind of admin support, maybe that could be something that they delegate, but it would be good to have those on file so you can see exactly what they are covering. Because I'm assuming you got those 15 contracts and you're thinking, I didn't even know I signed up for this.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah. Person that handles my billing was well aware of the different contracts, et cetera. But, I was a bit out of the loop, and I'm the decision maker in these circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
so,
So one thing that I didn't bring up, and I'm embarrassed that we didn't talk about it, is simply by your numbers. I think we recognize that the United Healthcare patients made up what, like 15% of your patient load?
yes, good point. Let's see, I think at one point, United Healthcare made up 14.8% of my visits, but
Mm-hmm.
yet it accounted for 2.6% of my reimbursement.
Whoa.
And so, the disparity there is, that was another thing that I had calculated that when you and I were speaking at one point. And, that was another shocking statistic that made me think that, the effects, not only from a business perspective of to me as an individual, but also, again, as I indicated to my coworkers. And that's where you have to start looking at
Yeah.
it much more carefully.
And that 2% doesn't account for the headaches that they give you in
Oh, no, because,
denials and
yeah,
authorizations and all that kind of stuff. It doesn't account. I
yeah.
mean, they're one of the worst pairs, but they give you some of the most headaches, right?
Yeah. Well, I've been at one point, they let me know I was switched to a different tier. They
Oh, I
have
remember
different
the tier things.
tiers.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And so the different tiers means additional administrative burden.
Right.
And so out of frustration, I called one time and just said, why am I going to another tier? The person on the other end of the phone, whom should have been able to adequately tell me this is a UHC worker, by the way.
Right.
They could not explain to me why I'd shifted to another tier. I think it was just my turn to go to that tier so they could frustrate me for a year
Yeah.
or something. I
Yeah.
don't know.
They spun the roulette wheel and your name popped up,
Yes.
that kind of
Yep.
thing. Yeah. I get it. I get it. Yeah. So how long has it been now that you've been out of network?
Probably, let's see, October of
Yeah.
last year.
Tell me about your experience since then. Anything you can share?
I haven't had one issue, to be honest with you.
Really?
Again, I'm still in the UHC, commercial, and Medicare.
Okay, that's right. But with
And
the
so,
increased reimbursement rates, that's right.
yes, so what I did drop was the Medicaid side.
Hmm.
And so the ones that have contacted me, I've been steering them in the right direction,
Okay,
giving them some advice. I've done a couple of courtesy checks,
great.
communicated back with the doctor just to still make sure that number one, did they need physical therapy services, um, and communicate with the doctor. Because you have to understand, in a small community, I get a lot of eval and treats
Yeah,
from the PCPs.
right,
And but we also have the name and number of someone to send them to from a physical therapy perspective at the
right.
front. And
Good.
so, we don't just say, sorry, good luck to you. We help them take the next step and get where they need to be and adequately explain to them,
Yeah.
what's going on.
Well, and that still serves your purpose as wanting to be a part of the community. You're not going to leave them cold turkey. You're going to say, hey, we're not unfortunately taking that insurance, but here is a provider who will and treat you
Absolutely.
appropriately. And it's only been a few months. Have you been able to compare those numbers? It was 15% and then 2% of financial or of your revenues. Are you far enough along that you've seen a difference in that at all?
Honestly, I haven't gone back and
Okay,
reinvestigated that, but
that's fine.
feel pretty confident that everything's moving in the right direction. I can tell you one thing that um, I have been able to increase the patient visits I feel like I'm taking better care of the patients that we do have,
Yeah,
just by a small decrease. It's opened up the avenues that you mentioned.
mm,
I think my therapists feel better about the care they're given because we've always prided ourselves on that, like everybody
right,
else,
right.
and it's really frustrating when you even feel remotely like that might be slipping slightly, uh, and you can't let that occur.
You can always do better if you see patients more frequently, um, right? I mean, the results are just going to be better if you see them more frequently. It's better to treat somebody 2 times a week for 4 weeks instead of 1 time a week for 8 weeks, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, get
And,
them there
that's part
faster.
of the conversation I had with the staff, because, I'm very transparent. We talk about decisions. It's not a dictatorship. I have the final say, but I do, attempt to get buy-in on most major decisions. And we had the conversation of, if patients need to be here 3 times a week and we see them once or twice, every other week because of the inability to get them in a timely manner, we're not doing them justice.
Right.
That's the bottom line. It's not fair to that patient.
Right.
And
Exactly.
so
I agree. Yeah. Well, anything more you want to add to your experience that you shared today?
I don't think so, but I would encourage everyone to, take a hard look at it. You have to find the time, reach out to someone, coach, etc., discuss it. Because often the other thing about being a rural physical therapist is that, you don't often have that um, peer network of
Right.
people that are walking in your shoes.
Right.
Um, and it's very advantageous, to discuss that and walk through the um, objective numbers as well as the psychological things that you're dealing with.
Hmm.
And, I guess a takeaway is by dropping an insurance, you're not giving away your altruistic nature. You can still take pro bono cases and just limit the percentage. There's other ways of serving your community better by doing a better service to the patients that you are taking.
Yeah. And for those who have listened, a couple episodes ago, I spoke with another owner in Vegas who's dropped a few low paying insurances by this point. And the potential that he has now that he's gotten a greater, well, he was at a negative profit margin. Now he actually has a profit margin, and the ability to take care of his team is dramatically different. And the possibilities that he sees before himself in terms of what he can do for his team and expansion now, Will Humphreys coined the term profitability unlocks possibility. And the possibilities now are there, and he's able to move forward in greater confidence as a business owner, knowing his numbers a little bit better, and having gone through that process successfully gives him confidence in maybe being a little bit more investigative into the other contracts that he has that he might want to drop as well.
Yeah. And, you said something there that sparked a thought as well, is that I think another reason I had my head in the sand for so long about not dropping UHC in particular is because we were still doing fine, financially. And I just kind of justified that. There's a million excuses, when
Right.
you're doing something that you really shouldn't.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it came to the point in time, because as you well know, with the Medicare cuts, et cetera, what have
Mm-hmm.
we had? 10% over the last 5 years, maybe just
Mm-hmm.
in Medicare alone, and everyone else follows suit. And so, you see that profit margin shrinking, and we're still fine, but I feel like I've almost plateaued where I can't do more for my staff.
Right.
And, that was kind of again, you asked me about a tipping point, so to speak.
Yeah. Do you have any other insurances that you have a target on by chance?
Absolutely. And I don't mind saying Cigna. Yes, they are next.
You've already got
Yeah,
them in your sights, huh?
absolutely. Yes.
That's cool to hear.
That's another one that's been at the same rate since the beginning of time. And
Uh,
um, I've got to make some decisions about that one as
yeah.
well.
And having gone through the experience with United Healthcare, does that give you a little bit more confidence in approaching Cigna and what to do next?
It's a game changer,
Right.
absolutely. Um, because I was like everybody else, you hear that they're not going to negotiate, and, there's just, and you never know. If you
You
need to
never know.
negotiate, reach out and just see what they tell you. Now, I will tell you, they're probably, no matter what region of the country you're in, they're probably not going to go above $75 a visit.
Mm.
That's my takeaway from conversations, etc.
Mm.
You know, it doesn't matter who you are, where you are, that's probably their limit. Because I think that'll decrease their profit from 24 billion to 23.5 billion if they, go above the $75. So.
Right. Well, and then as an owner, you've got to be clear with yourself. Am I okay with that? Or do I need to stand firm at my number and be clear at what your number is and say, yeah, you can maybe 75 is your max. I'm sorry, I just can't do that. And that's the proper way to negotiate is know what your number is and if you're willing, if you're not willing
Hmm.
to cut off, then you're not in a powerful position to negotiate.
Yeah,
Um, so that's good
absolutely.
to know. Cool,
Yeah,
man.
there is one thing. Let me say about the negotiation part is that when you submit your official letter to the contract manager that you want to renegotiate, it goes to a board.
Mm,
And the board looks at it and it looks at what tier you're in, what other providers, the number of visits you have, et cetera, et cetera.
that's right.
And then they come back to you. And so, they look at it relatively objectively, I think.
Mhm.
Um, and so, you never know. Just ask and
Yeah,
see if you want to at least go that step first.
right.
But I don't want everyone to get complacent and just stay in, even still a substantially low paying rate below your
Right.
cost. Once it gets to the portion of your business, like I told you, I think it was, what did I say, 14.6% or
Mhm.
somewhere in that neighborhood. I mean, that's a pretty substantial amount of your total visits. That was for a year, by the way.
Yeah.
Um, and I mean, that's a huge portion because, initially it was 2.4% for years and years and years.
Mm,
That was the other reason that I didn't worry about it so much. But
sure.
um, but if you ever investigate United Health Group, I guess it was about 2 to 3 years ago, they've had a massive proliferation in the number of clients they brought in, so to speak.
Mm,
And so, they're taking over more and more.
insurance companies.
Yeah, United Healthcare is gaining more and more of the market share, it seems, over the last few years. I don't have my source in front of me or anything, but I ran across some data indicated that the United Health Group has had a huge proliferation in terms of the number of clients. And so, this is a real issue that we've got to continue to look at and address
Mhm.
because, as we have more and more companies that switch to the United Healthcare in particular, for their company benefit plans, then, we have to take a strong look at this. And so,
Mhm. We're
that's
going
why I
to
say,
not knowingly, unknowingly, we're going to be taking more United Healthcare plans simply because they have acquired other insurance companies over time.
yes, sir. And it's just because, like I mentioned, the fact again that, originally for years and years, it was less than 3% of my total patient population in a given year.
Yeah.
And it's gone up to almost 15%. Well, the
Right.
demographics in my area haven't changed that much. It's just that the industries have been lured into the United Healthcare, in particular, insurance,
Right.
for their companies.
Right. Right. Exactly. They're
So,
a significantly greater player, as
yes, sir.
evidenced by their $24 billion profit.
Absolutely. Which I helped facilitate for them.
Yes. Thank
Uh,
you so much,
absolutely.
Trace. I'm
Absolutely.
sure they appreciate you.
Yeah.
Uh, thank you so much for taking your time and being willing to share your experience, Trace. I hope it was valuable to those who are listening because you went through not just the process, but also it took some effort beforehand to get over that hump to make the commitment. If people wanted to talk to you about your experience or have questions for you, how are you willing to share? How do people get a hold of you?
Absolutely. I'd appreciate the opportunity if anyone has any questions. And listen, there's never any such thing as a dumb question. I mean, if you want to just reach out and, just talk about how to start or anything like that, I'm more than happy to share because, that's what's helped me so many times is, talking to you as my business coach and to other members of my peer-to-peer group. So you can reach me. I'm on LinkedIn. Again, my name is Trace Kennemore, Trace. And then also, if you want to reach out, shoot me a text at 423-605-7779. And I guess the last best place to reach me would be by email. It's trace10, TRACE10 at srapt.org.
Great. Well, thanks for sharing. Again, thanks for sharing. Thanks for taking the time today.
Absolutely.
Hopefully, others in the industry have taken courage off of your experience itself and are looking at some of their peers sideways and looking forward to make a commitment to do better.
I hope so.
All right. Thanks, Trace.
Yes, sir. Thank you.